Hi there, I'm Evan Sanford and welcome to this edition to Inside Our Towns. I'm a contributor for the Our Towns Civic Foundation and also the Executive Director at the Redlands Chamber of Commerce in Redlands, California. Our guests today are with Project Fighting Chance, 501c3 nonprofit in San Bernardino, California. It's a nationally recognized championship amateur boxing and after-school enrichment program serving youths 8 to 18 through fitness, nutrition, arts, and social emotional learning. The organization is focused on reducing childhood violence, aggression and trauma, and food insecurity. First, we'll be speaking with Ian Franklin, the organization's founder and president. It's been his goal to have a positive impact on inner-city at-risk youth, and Project Fighting Chance has received several accolades for its work. Franklin feels that Project Fighting Chance has only scratched the surface as to the impact it will have on the San Bernardino community. And next, Terry Boykins is the organization's executive director, who's been in that position since 2019. The next year, Project Fighting Chance was awarded California Nonprofit of the Year. Earlier this year, Boykins introduced the S Factor as part of Something Just for Girls After School to collaborate with the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office, Bureau of Victim Services. I assure you both their bios could go on for the rest of this episode. And finally, we're in for a special treat. Joining our conversation is co-founder of Our Towns and a good personal friend, Jim Fallows. You might remember in the HBO documentary, Project Fighting Chance was in the opening segment, which of course has gotten tremendous response. Jim has stayed in touch over the last 3 years with Ian and Terry and is very impressed with what they're doing, and he'll have some questions for them a little bit later. We'll get to much more of what each of them are doing in their town, but I want to first welcome our guests. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Evan.
Absolutely. So Ian, I want to start with you and give us a little bit of background on the program and how you came to found it.
Well, being a product of the inner city, understanding the systemic needs of especially the youth and the obstacles, I was a person that had a life of turbulence and mostly self-inflicted poor choices and decisions. And as a result of those poor choices and decisions, paying a lot of consequences. Went to a lot of funerals of people that didn't make it in the struggle. But when I came to San Bernardino, I came a single father of 3. And I came vowing to make a change in my life. So it just didn't depend on me anymore. I was actually looked at to be a role model to my children, and I wanted to set them on the right path. So it just so happened that my son was very, very small for his age at the time, and began to bring them to a church and try to instill some spiritual values in them. And in this process, my son, who was very small for his age, was remembering, because I just came from back east, but he used to be kind of our gym mascot. And so we used to put these gloves on him when he was 2 and 3 years old. He'd be running around hitting the bags. And so when he came out here, he was getting a little picked on. And he asked me one day, "Hey, can you teach me how to box?" I remember going to these boxing gyms. And, for a while I didn't, because he didn't give me the right answers as to why. But then he did. He said, "Dad, I just don't feel good about myself and I don't feel confident." And so I began to train him in my garage. And as we were training, neighborhood kids started coming. And before I knew it, I had 20 kids in a garage. Thus the birth of the program, in a garage. And so in going to my church, I became actively involved in a peacemakers mentoring ministry that was going into juvenile hall. Being a former participant at juvenile hall a lot, I had a good influence on, and I was inspiring a lot of these kids. And so I began to put 2 and 2 together. And I realized that the good Lord was telling me it's time to go back from whence you came and impart your wisdom and everything that you've been through to help youth. And so it became clear to me that that's what I needed to do. So in the process, my pastor heard about what I was doing, invited me to the church, and we went under their corporate structure for a few years. And so Project Fighting Chance really was birthed as the Fights boxing ministry. Fights is an acronym for Faith in God Heals Troubled Souls. And for about 8, 9 years. I was just under the corporate structure. They actually received a building behind what we were doing. So we had a small building. But I began to realize that anything that I needed to do, I had to get approval from a board. And it was a chain of command and a lot of things that I had to wait upon to find out. And so I started to realize that I had a vision that I needed to kind of get more in control of the direction. And so started a nonprofit. I had a person that was working with the mayor, a man by the name of Kent Paxton, that I reached out to, and I said, here I have this wonderful idea, and I keep running into brick walls. And so Kent put me in touch with the Parks and Rec director, and they had this old building, and it was old, but it was something. And they said, here, we believe in what you're doing, do the best you can with this facility. And so this facility was so bad that when it would rain, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning, I would have to get up in my car and drive to this facility and put buckets. And I knew where all the raindrops were going to come. It became systematic. And so after a while, I made the mistake of complaining and asking for assistance. And the city told me, we have to close down this building. But I had a ram in the bush, as God always provides. And the director of Parks and Rec then was a guy by the name of Mickey Valdivia. He said, look, I'm gonna throw you a bone here. He said, there's a huge facility on the base, on the old Norton Air Force Base that you can't use forever. He says, but you can use it for a while until you find a place. And so we began scurrying around trying to find a place. And a guy that was working with the city manager put me in contact with the organization where we're at now. And then we went and sat down with them. They allowed us to come onto their facility. In the interim, I needed some business savvy people. And I began saying a prayer that's in First Chronicles called the Prayer of Jabez. And it's about enlarging your territory. And as I did this, the good Lord started sending me people. When I got a guy by the name of Terry Boykins, Rory Gandy, and I'd already had Pastor Laquetta, who was kind of the glue holding this sinking ship together, it was divine intervention. And ever since then, and Terry, I mean, to me, he's the engine. You know, I'm the figurehead, but he's the man to make us go. And I just appreciate, because I truly believe now, and believe me, my faith was tried, because I always say I'm a man of faith, but my faith has been on shaky ground through these 20-something years. It's been 21 years now. But God always shows me when my faith starts to flounder that, look what I'm doing. You better just sit back, fasten your seatbelt, because I'm taking you on a ride, you know. And so that's kind of how we started, and we've been growing ever since.
Well, Terry, not every day can a person be called the answer to another man's prayers. But I think my question would be, how did you get involved? What was it about the mission that you believed in?
Wow.
And talk to us a little bit more about what you've been doing since you joined.
Well, you know, I tell you what, I don't know if it was a prayer Ian was looking for when I came his way. I think it was some other conversations we were having about what exactly do you expect me to do with your problem? And so we looked at this, and we have a mutual, very good person in the community, Dr. Joshua Beckley, that we were able to cross paths on. And Ian had shared with me, and of course, coming from a corporate background, I'm listening to this gentleman who's passionate and nonprofit, and he's got boxing and all that's good. But I was listening, what's the plan? What do you do with this program? And where does it take people? And he was like, I think at the time he was putting buckets out inside of the facility, and I couldn't quite comprehend what he was doing. And he was trying to explain to me, and I think the water was coming down. I was thinking, I'm gonna tap out on this one. I mean, I'm like, I don't think I want. If this is what I'm gonna be doing, I don't want to be running around putting buckets under leaking roofs as a part of working to save youth. That's not what my impression was. And I had to ask myself, if he's doing this, and working with youth, and he's unresolved, what tools and resources would he be able to give the young boys of color that are impacted by trauma? What would 10 years look like if this is what's going on? And so we began to really, and he and I had a very frank conversation about his trauma and his childhood experiences, which of course, went on to become hopefuls and some things that was going to focus on boxing, but we ended up turning it. And so that was really kind of the start of me being engaged, coming back around, listening to him at the fatherhood engagement, listening to a man who was conflicted by trauma, trying to raise children, 3 kids, as you mentioned. And I was like, this is a societal issue. We have men in this country who have not had their issues resolved, that are trying to do the right thing, but if they don't get the help and the resources, we're going to get this cycle that's going to plague our communities and our societies generation after generation. So nothing gets fixed. We just get Band-Aids all over the United States.
So let's talk about that turn. And there have been some massive successes that you both have under your belts. So Ian, I want to go back to you and let's talk about the Fights Boxing Club, which is one specific program. Talk to us about the success, and you have a couple really great case studies that have turned out to be massive successes.
Yeah, well, through the years, I think the good Lord gave me the ability to teach something that I've been a part of most of my life at a high level. I didn't even realize how much I had absorbed to be able to teach until I started doing it. But through the years, we've had 16 national champions. During the time that Hopeful started, when we moved into this building, we had 5 kids, all at one time or another. All 5 of these kids were ranked #1 in the United States. Currently, we have one of them still with us. We call him Terrible Terry Washington, #1, and he's a 7-time. It's hard to win one national because you're going against the best in the United States. People don't understand how difficult it is to win one national. He's won 7. And he is really a hopeful for the 2024 Olympic Games. We really feel strongly like we're going to seize that moment and we're going for a medal. And I think it will be great for this community. We have what I call Reloaded, and we have some up and comers that we just took 6 athletes. Most of them had 1 or 2 fights to a state tournament, and 4 out of all 6 went to the finals, fought their way to the finals. 4 of them emerged as champions, state champions. And our little girl, she's a 10-year-old dynamo. We call her Beastie Rachel Ariano. She came away with the best female boxer of the entire tournament award. And so we feel like we have a system, and the system works, and it's plug and play.
Absolutely. And it's hard to hear that a 10-year-old could beat me up pretty easily.
She's a tough one, I'm gonna tell you.
It sounds like that's probably the case. And Terry, I want to go to you and the program S Factor that you brought to the table. So tell us about that one.
The S Factor, I think, was very demonstrative of what Project Finding Chance's commitment to young ladies and girls in society. When you talk about teaming with the District Attorney's Office of San Bernardino County, the Victim Bureau Services, we had to really look at this whole component of abuse. And as Coach mentioned about releasing those happy endorphins, being able to get that workout and feeling a certain way. So we understood that a lot of young ladies that were coming into the boxing gym were coming in, but were they being served at their level of being young ladies? Some of the issues they're confronted with, dating as a teen, the sex trafficking issue, the undisclosed sexual assault and abuse that they may have grown up with, the adverse childhood experiences. So we wanted to basically give them an opportunity to not only have an outlet in boxing, but mentoring with professional women that could basically maybe understand where they've been as women and help them process that particular hurt and that particular issue, and to begin to create some resilience at an earlier age so that when they became older, they would not be caught in this trap of having to deal with these triggers of trauma. And so Project Finding Chance became very committed. This is why when you talk about Rachel having a situation of working with a champion coach such as Coach Ian, being able to be prepared, but being able to grow around a positive environment. So many of our young girls of color don't grow around positive environments. How do we at Project Finding Chance give them an opportunity to do so? And so the S factor really is the safety factor. It's about being secure with yourself. It's about really knowing your environment, knowing how to prevent issues and predicaments with teen dating violence, getting pimped up on the street, getting situations where you're silent and you got shame and you don't want to tell anybody, but we wanted them to open up and talk about it's okay to hurt, it's okay to reach out. So we did that. And it's become, of course, now it's going into an annual program, which is what we want to do is we've got, oh my gosh, which one of the areas we've got right now designated at the boxing gym and the enrichment room is that they'll come in for boxing workout and being able to interact in physical and body imaging and fitness and self-esteem building. That's one part of it. But they didn't get a chance to go over to the enrichment room and really talk about some very significant personal issues and have somebody that can guide them through that process. And that's what we're going to do.
As we look to the future for your organization, before I pass it off to Jim, I want to ask Terry, tell us a little bit more about how you are seeing the impact of what you're doing on mental health and the and addressing crime in the area, and also how you're impacting workforce development. That seems really interesting for a nonprofit like yours to be having that impact. So tell us a little bit more.
Well, Evan, that's a great pose of questions and framework. We understand that in America, if you work hard, you can accomplish things, you can achieve things. You've got to put some work in. I think when we talk about the impact, after school programs, those hours between 3 o'clock and 7 p.m. are the most vulnerable. And I think that when we look at what do we have available, what kind of programs do we have in that gap? So many parents are trying to make a living and, of course, inflation and cost and whether or not they're going to have housing, and to think about where your child is between 3 and 7 o'clock when you're trying to make a living to just get some food home to put on the table. We've got to have a place where kids can go for those that need a place to go. Not everybody has a nice home that they can walk into and the dog barking in the front yard and, the music's playing when you open the door. That's not everybody's situation. But what we want to do is make sure that after school, particularly children of color and those in need, underserved populations, have a place to go. Key. Why is that key? Because when children don't have a place to go and they have the tendency to congregate and look at their surroundings and their environments, they're going to replicate what they see happening in those environments. We all know about what's going on in this country. We cannot be naive to it in terms of follow home robberies, smash and grabs, shoplifting, blatant shoplifting. You're talking about carjackings. We have to ask ourselves, when we know we can do something about it, do we want our children participating in those things? Because if we don't, we've got to invest where we want them to be versus where we don't want them to be. And I wouldn't want someone following Mr. Fallows home because he's working on something, and it would be a shame for a child in the program or a program that doesn't exist to think that's the only way he has to make it is to take something from somebody else who's done something to earn it. So our whole focus is to make sure that we keep Jim Fallows safe, we keep Evan safe, we keep Terry safe, we keep Ian safe, we keep all your family. And if we don't have these programs, this is what's going to occur. We got to be real smart about what we're doing. And so in addition to that, what we're doing for us, the impact, workforce development. So we reduce crime, after school programs, reducing crime, but creating skill sets and trades and education value so that when we look at the future, we look at the individuals who are going to be flying the planes and building the factories and moving the fuel and creating technology. We have to begin understanding the coping mechanism, as Coach mentioned, that these young people are dealing with. What is their capacity to deal with conflict? We don't want you getting into a situation. This is why when we talk about the boxing and the aggression diversion and reducing childhood violence, we don't want you to take an automatic weapon into a workplace because the employer says you need to do better in your productivity at work. You can get ticked off and not want to deal with reality to say, look, you know, in a workplace, you got to produce, or you have to do this. Why would a person leave a building and come back and shoot up the place because they don't have good coping skills? What we're saying at Project Fighting Chance, if we understand how that investment works and we can get it to children before they get to the workplace, they will have some reflection in their foundation, say, you know what, I remember when I was over at Project Fighting Chance and we had this conflict and we were arguing, I was angry all the time because my dad wasn't there or this person wasn't there. Guess what? I can take that needs to improve on my performance evaluation and I can do better. I might even get promoted. That's what we're focused on.
Thank you so much. Jim, I want to pass it over to you. There's some stuff that's happening right now in the news with Project Fighting Chance. I know you have some questions, so it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Evan, and thanks for your skillful moderation of this conversation. I should just say, for myself and for my wife, Deb, what an honor it is to have Ian and Terry here on this podcast for the Our Towns Foundation. In early 2019, 3.5 years ago as we speak, we were so glad with our wonderful HBO colleagues, Steve Asher and Jeannie Jordan, and Ian and Terry, you'll remember Brian Harvey, the cameraman who was dancing through the boxing gym with his Steadicam, avoiding getting hit himself for this wonderful footage. It was so wonderful to see you. I can hardly begin to tell you the response we've gotten from the viewing audience to what they saw about Project Fighting Chance. I have one brief follow-up for Ian about the past and the present, and then a question for Terry about the present and the future. So Ian, the question about the past and the present is in what HBO chose as the 60-second, the 90-second trailer for a film, they include about 10 seconds of it is you. And you're talking about how people think of this as just a boxing gym, but it really is so much more. Can you say a word more about what the so much more is beyond what people are seeing on the screen there?
Well, it's in our objective. Our objective is, as we talk about, to reduce childhood violence, aggression, and trauma, and get these kids prepared to be positive contributors in their community. And so in using the therapeutic benefits to the boxing, in using the wraparound services in the creative ways, we have an art program, a chess club, feeding them, addressing food insecurity, and giving these kids all their needs and instilling in them a positive value and mentorship, helping them, answering questions. Every day I go there, I'm pulled to the side about something from a kid, and I'm answering questions. I'm giving advice. I'm being a positive mentor. And so what we are doing, because again, like Terry said, a lot of the things we take for granted, a lot of these kids don't have. You know what I mean? The transition to some of these kids, he's living here now, oh, now he's living there. And so what we try to do is number one, in those critical hours after school, provide positive activities, but surround them with positive information and instill in them values. So we hold ourselves accountable on how we walk because they're looking at us. Mm-hmm. So all we're trying to do is make sure, no matter what trauma they have, that we can get them through, help them get the mental health services that they need, and help them become positive adults. So if we can stop the chain, break the chains in their families, and help them create a new family dynamic, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Terry, my question is about the present and the future. Project Fighting Chance could hardly have won more acclaim. It's nonprofit of the year. You have all these national champions. You have somebody who's training for the Olympics. You've won just praise from everybody who has studied your work. I gather there is an item in the news that is affecting your immediate future. Tell us what is going on and what people who respect what Project Fighting Chance has done can do to help.
Well, thank you, Jim. And Project Fighting Chance has been confronted with an issue which is really significant to the community. And that is cost related to our expense of being at a certain facility in San Bernardino, the Home Enabling Service, which is, I believe the property is owned by the Presbytery of Riverside. We have increased the value of that property significantly with regards to our touching it, our contribution, our tranquility garden, and painting the internal, external furniture, contributions, outdoor picnic furniture that's out there. But now we've been asked to leave. And we have to really look at why are we being asked to leave? Some people talk about it being a dollar amount. We pay a certain dollar amount that we've agreed upon, and then we have been asked to pay 3 times that amount as a result of us accomplishing some success, which I believe is what it's attributed to. Project Fighting Chance has struggled to get to this level. It's very expensive to get these kids out to tournaments and on planes and in hotels and fed, and not just one time, but repeatedly. In doing so, I think we have basically been caught into this economic issue of real estate and valuations of, uptick, that now that the market is doing well, the agreement that we had with you is no longer our word. We're going to go market conditions now and say we want market value, regardless of what you've done to the property. We want 3 times the amount that you were paying. In addition to, we want you, if you don't pay, we just want you to leave the place. I bring this up because this is not about money. This is about making a commitment to the community that when you put a youth program in place that has access to bringing over 100 kids a day, this is not a situation where this is theory. Project Fighting Chance, without a question, is a busy place, very busy place. And it's a responsible place. And so when we're asked to vacate the premises, you have to ask the owners, the landlord of that property, if you're not going to have a Project Fighting Chance here, then what are you going to replace us with? Because these kids are going to have to go somewhere, and I can tell you where they're going to go. They're going to go to the street. There's no questions, we've seen this play out before. We know that when children do not have a place to go after school, they will go to whatever fits their social emotional needs, wherever they fit, whether that's gangs, whether that's prostitution, whether that's hanging out in the streets, whether that's dealing drugs, whether that's not doing homework, whatever it may be. So what we're basically confronted with right now, and this is a big, I think, important message when we start talking about our towns around the United States. When we have programs that are in these communities, underserved populations, inner city youth, and people begin to pursue economic gain, and we understand that. But that economic gain is a social cost down the road. And we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to deal with the economic gain of a business, or are we willing to take on the social cost of society over the lifespan? And that's where we are at this point, this juncture. We're looking at working some things out with regards to these respective entities, but we want to do it in a responsible, accountable way that is very transparent, is very clear, and is very forward moving. Because if Project Fighting Chance is not going to be there, and you want more money because you can get money for the building, then who is going to be there? And if this was for the community, then don't have something that's working be asked to leave and you don't have a game plan to bring something in to replace it that's going to value the community. And that's where we are, Jim.
So let me just ask two quick follow-ups, and we'll provide information, excuse me, on how people can learn more. First, who is asking you for the money? And second, how much money are we talking about?
Correct. That's very good. The Home and Neighborly Service, which is a legendary organization, social organization, community organization. The building there has been there about 100 years, I believe. This respective agency is asking us for the additional 3 times amount. Now, they are being backed up by the Presbytery of Riverside, which is located in Redlands, California. And so I believe the Presbytery, this is what we're trying to figure out. Coach and other board members, executive board members are trying to understand what exactly is the relationship between the Presbytery and the Home and Neighborly Service. We're not quite sure, but the Presbytery of Riverside and the Home and Neighborly Service in San Bernardino are the 2 entities that we are engaging with to try to get this resolved.
And the sums involved are roughly what?
We're currently at $500, I'm sorry, and then they want us to go to $1,500 per month.
Well, we will follow up on this and have links where people can learn more and see what you all think people can do to help. Evan, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. And I want to end on a little bit more of a positive note. Terry and Ian, if you can tell us about how you've expanded to, I believe, 11 satellite sites, basically positioning you as one of the major after-school programs in the area. So I'll hand it to either one of you to talk about it. That's a major accomplishment, and I don't know if this rent situation would impact the other sites, but this is the main site, so of course it does have the impact. But talk to us a little bit more about just how much coverage you're providing and what these sites do.
And, I tell you, I'll let Ian share a little bit, because some of what is happening on those sites, he actually oversaw doing the summer program on half of that impact that we're going to have for the school year. Ian?
And so what we're doing is we're putting our system in place in after school site locations. And so what they've come to us and say, hey, we believe in what you're doing. There's a value in what you're doing, and there are outcomes. And so we want you on our school sites. And so what we're going to do is have our program on these 11 school sites. And the funny thing is, we just went to a meeting that was preparation for all the service providers at these school sites, and we're being bombarded by other school sites who we're not even talking to. And so God knows how many school sites we're going to be on in the long run. So there is a need for what we do, and we're thankful and grateful that we can provide it.
So Terry, I hope the invitation will be a standing one for James and myself to come down and get some gloves on and see what you guys are all about.
We want that to happen. We want to make sure that as we look at you all being so composed and so natural in your setting, that we want everyone to understand that people deal with stress, people deal with trauma, and we think that to have 2 of you in the boxing gym, in the boxing ring together with some gloves on, may give the whole universe an opportunity to see how Evan Sanford and James Fallows really does what they do when they get in those boxing gloves and kind of look each other across the ring and get ready to go at it. And so we're going to put a stand invitation to, and coach will referee to make sure nobody gets hurt.
Rumble, young man, rumble.
Yeah.
So,
float like a butterfly.
My reaction, number 1, anything is possible. Number 2, I note that you're not inviting the real force in the family, Deb, to get in there with the boxing gloves.
That is one I would not accept. I would not go toe to toe.
Secret is out, right?
That's right. Well, Terry, Ian, Jim, thank you so much for joining the conversation today. Appreciate this important message getting out. And for those that are watching today, we'll see you next time. Until then, this is Inside Our Towns.